That'll be good.
I'm so sorry.
I'm trying to open.
I'm sorry, but there are priorities.
No, that's right.
I gotta see how the page
City
starts.
manager.
Wait until like halfway through it. I've been like, I did last time. I was like, oops.
Teenager.
See, that would have changed everything. If I'd have put it in before he walked in, now we gotta add 20 minutes. You're just jealous.
So I had quite a bit this last year, and I had a loss of memory. Anything in here, August 31st is getting donated. And he came home and picked up a few things, and I had washed everything, and put it on the table. Like, there's like,
Chief, are you?
I am good and nobody online.
Nobody
I
online?
grabbed about 3 things that we thought were the 3 things.
I've officially called this meeting of the Mount Vernon City Council to order, the first meeting for September, and welcome our visitors and guests here. And we'll start out our meeting with looking at the agenda and approving the agenda.
So moved.
And is there a second? Second. I'll take Greg and Mark, that's on that. So move a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chief, you can let us know if somebody does come on.
Will do.
Okay. The communications section of the meeting now, and this is for anyone who wishes to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda. But you're welcome to speak up to 5 minutes on the microphone here, and I think we've got Brandy Meistead who'd like to start us off here today. So, Brandy, the floor is yours.
Whole 5 minutes.
Do you need it?
There's nobody on, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I don't like.
You're good.
All right,
Yep.
cool. My name is Brandy Meisteid. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am a candidate for Lynn County Supervisor, and I simply just came today to introduce myself, face to the name type of deal. I certainly don't need the full 5 minutes, but I just wanted you guys all to know who I was and know that I'm born and raised in a small town. I come from Coggan, Iowa, and I'm running for supervisor because I want our small towns to have representation. And as a graduate of Northland, you know, I grew up playing Lisbon and Mount Vernon, and all the small towns really in District 3 are near and dear to my heart. And again, I just came to introduce myself. I would love to visit afterwards, but we certainly don't need to take up my 5 minutes doing that. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk afterwards. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brandy. Anybody else here to speak to the public comment before the meeting? Otherwise, we'll move to the consent agenda where we've got 3 items. Third one is means the filling of the cemetery commission. So that is now ready to go. And is the ball in our court on that, Chris, to set up the first meeting? Okay. They're anxious to go. Okay. But consent agenda, those 3 items.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I'll second.
And Scott. Moved and seconded to approve the 3 item consent agenda. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no items for public hearing. First item, we got ordinance approval 9/3/2024A. I think I need to read this whole thing. Providing that general property taxes levied and collected each year on certain property located within the Stonebrook urban renewal area, the city of Mount Vernon, county of Lynn, state of Iowa, by and for the benefit of the state of Iowa, city of Mount Vernon, county of Lynn, Mount Vernon Community School District, and other taxing districts, to be paid to a special fund for payment of principal and interest on loans, monies advanced to and indebtedness, including bonds issued or to be issued, incurred in the city in connection with the Stonebrook Urban Renewal Area, Phase 2B parcels and Phase 4 parcels. So, Greg, this is for consideration for first reading, proceed to the second reading, and ask about any comments or questions from there, or leave a staff explanation. Ed?
So, this is just a continuation. When both of the subdivisions and TIF agreements were originally adopted, adopted, there was one master ordinance. In order to maintain a 10-year lifespan for each of the phases, though, you have to wait until that phase is complete and then pass the subsequent ordinance, and that starts the clock ticking for that 10-year period. Each of the 5 phases in both of these subdivisions has a max dollar amount that they can receive in TIF rebates. It will not exceed the master agreement. They've just broken them down per phase. So.
Any need for explanation, or are we ready to move
I
forward?
would move approval of ordinance 9-3-2024A with the details read as by the mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second? Seconded to move forward with first reading on 9-3-2024A. Any other further questions? Otherwise, we will put it to a
Sorry,
vote.
did Mark second that?
Yeah, yeah, Paul and Mark. Yeah.
Okay.
Just one, letter I, afterwards, council may suspend rules and proceed to the final reading after a vote of the first reading. Is there any advice that you give us on that?
So there's not an immediate need to waive readings. I would say this is routine enough that you could. Historically, you haven't unless it's been kind of an immediate need. I would probably wait. I would let the first reading go, and then if there hasn't been any additional comments after your second reading, then maybe wait the third one and get it done the second reading in September.
Okay, I'll leave you lead on that.
I think we're to the vote then.
Turler,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Andreessen,
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
That first reading passes. Moving on to 9-3-2024B, provided that general property taxes levied and collected each year on certain property located within the Spring Meadow Heights urban renewal area, and City of Mount Vernon, County of Lynn, State of Iowa, by and for the benefit of the State of Iowa, City of Mount Vernon, County of Lynn, Mount Vernon Community School District, and other taxing districts, to be paid to a special fund for payment of principal and interest on loans, monies advanced to and indebtedness, including bonds issued or to be issued incurred by the city in connection with the Spring Meadow Heights urban renewal area Phase 3 parcels. Again, we're looking for possibility of moving forward on the first reading.
I move.
Go ahead, Seth.
Okay, I'll move to approve ordinance 9-3-2024B as read by the mayor.
And I think I'll take Paul a second. Is that okay? Well, definitely Paul on that one.
I have one quick question, not related specifically to this TIF funding, but correct me if I'm wrong, Spring Meadow Heights had some multifamily units in one of the later phases?
You actually approved an amendment that flipped those phases around.
Okay.
So instead of going to the north towards the townhome development, that would be the Elliott Park extension, we allow them to go south towards Candlestick. So phase 2, so the original phase 3 became phase 2.
Okay.
And that was just a couple of meetings ago. That was when he was with us, I think.
Yeah, and so when, just as a reminder for myself, which phase then would
I think it was
those?
phase 5.
Okay, so we're a little bit away.
So there will
from there
be,
anyway.
phase 4 will essentially finish the 3 loops.
Okay.
And then phase 5 will actually come north off of the loop, and then it doesn't come around and meet at more of a longer cul-de-sac / dead end that they've worked out. It's not multifamily per se as much as it's condo, lower housing costs.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Got a motion on the floor to approve the first reading. If there are no further questions, I think we are ready for a vote.
Andreessen,
Yes.
Turler,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
That ordinance passes. Moving on to resolutions for approval, we've got 2. The first one is for the pool renovations project. 3 bidders, I believe, and Anything to add?
Yeah, so we did have 3 bidders, the apparent bid, low bidder, lowest qualified bidder as Woodruff Construction. They had a base bid of $1,443,700 and an alternate bid of $529,000 for a total bid amount of $1,972,000. With that being said, I would recommend to the council the approval of Woodruff with the base bid and not the alternate. The base bid is slightly higher than Water's Edge, had estimated a little over 150,000. I would prefer to have that space. I mean, we take the total bid up to 1.972. We've essentially closed all funding that we have, so.
I know part of the alternate bids was that standalone slide. Is that,
That is the alternate.
that it? It's that 529 is that whole deal? Okay.
And I know, haven't had a chance to, I mean, we'll talk to Woodruff when they have the pre-construction meeting, but anytime you're opening a facility that's first constructed in 1959 or 60 or whatever it is, I expect to find some problems, so.
We're gonna need that
Yeah, I want to keep that gap there.
$57,000. Yeah.
Just be on the safe side.
Well, unless there are other questions or concerns, I would move approval of Resolution 9-3-2024A, approving the base bid to Woodruff in the amount of $1,443,700.
Scott?
I'll second
Mark? Representative from Woodruff here, do you want to speak to anything here?
We found some, in the alternate bid, some price discrepancies post-bid, and there's some wiggle room, like 6-figure wiggle room in the price coming down. So not a lot, I think, to get with your budget, but there's, they had doubled up the ladder in between the 2 standalone units, so they said they didn't have it in, and then the next day they said they had it in, and on bid day, we put a $100,000 contingency on it to cover it. So that's doubled up, so we can negotiate that through pre-construction.
Yep.
I think the only other thing, is the pool still full of water now?
It was doggy day today, so I think it's going to be out tomorrow.
We would start our normal winterization, actually tomorrow.
If the pool has been leaking, we just finished the renovation of the Charles City pool, that we did a leak test prior with the valuable water that's there. You can kind of do some leak tests to figure out.
Yeah, we can definitely hold it in there.
Yeah. We can talk soon about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of why we're here.
When you drain the pool, you don't have that opportunity to find all the spots that it's leaking, so we can
Yes.
discover those now. And
Absolutely.
wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
That doesn't change your recommendation?
Not immediately. The approval of the base bid though gets them started. And then, you know, if we happen to get to a point too where we've opened some of the concrete aprons around and we're sitting better than we think we're going to be, then we can always come back in and.
It's a good
Yeah.
phased approach to it, so it could happen.
It's standalone, so it's not, it wouldn't necessarily hold up the construction of that particular basin.
Okay. I just recollection of history with an elementary addition, I don't remember which one it was, with Woodruff, so they've been in the district and to the best of my, in the community, to the best of my knowledge, it was a good, I did a summer project with Pebble money, but it got done on time and so on, so I think that was a positive there. Matt, are you okay with the timing and?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to Mr. Redmer about it as well, yeah. Yeah.
So we've got a motion on the floor to approve the resolution 9-3-2024A. And if there are no further questions, I think we are ready to vote on that.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Andreessen.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Good luck, hit it hard, be ready to go in May next year.
I live on Country Club Drive, so I'll drive by every day, make sure.
Thank you.
Post your name and number.
I got that already.
Second resolution is approving reduced stormwater easement, lot 4, stormwater 5. Explanation?
I would say the overland flow easements are a good thing when we do subdivision design. They can also be semi-detrimental to the people that purchase the homes because it takes up a significant amount of their backyard. In this instance, these 3 properties plus an outlet that the city used to own to the north along 13th had a 30-foot overland flowage easement because the school owned the other property and we weren't sure what was going to be there. So after the school obviously built the MAC, one of the property owners that owns lot 4 asked if they'd be able to reduce that overland flowage easement. So we required them to hire an engineer and re-evaluate the stormwater calculations for that entire portion of the subdivision. Which I said, if you do that and the engineer comes back and says that we can reduce it, then I would have B&K review it just to make sure, and they said yes. So this would vacate about 15 feet of that 30-foot overland flowage easement. And staff, with that gives them another 15 feet of property for their pool.
I had never heard of this concept until a question came up about pool placement in someone's backyard in relation to the border of the city. But I'm glad they were able to amiably work it out and with their own engineer, and our engineer signed off on it, and we're all smarter for it and better for it. So
I don't know if I'm any smarter for it because the supporting documents that the engineer produced, I couldn't read it. So the explanation was very helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It takes an engineer to read that.
But to confirm, B&K has.
They have reviewed it, so it's been reviewed by 2 engineers at this point. Yeah, they're complicated. So overland flowage easements are designed because we do a lot of building up lots now. So we build up where we're going to complete the street. That gives a nice pad so that everybody can have a walkout basement. The challenge with that is once you build up that area and you have 2 competing lots that have a central backyard, the stormwater from each of those locations has to obviously go somewhere. It gets more expensive to put it together. And some catch basins in there, so they use overland flowage easements, which is nothing more than a glorified ditch, by the way. They shape it to a specific slope, and it is designed to carry the water off the property. In this case, normally you would split that. It would be a 30-foot total. It would be 15 feet on either person's property, but when the subdivision was being put in place, obviously they didn't know what the school was going to do, so they erred on the side of caution, put all 30 feet on their property. I would imagine if the owners of lot 2 and 3 had any desire in the future, they would be able to piggyback off of these calculations. They'd have to have somebody update it for their specific lot. But the only thing that I can sign off on though in overland flow easement is a chain link fence because it can't impede flow.
So, and Tom, having been the school board president at the time, just for everybody's knowledge, that stormwater basin basically takes in all of the area from Cornell to about 4th Street, I think it is, and down. So when this was all undeveloped and whatnot, this easement and the drainage ditch, there were problems with it because of silting and whatnot, and the city invested quite a bit to get it to where it is today, and the school did a lot of work when they built the MAC, and Cornell, we all really partnered together to get it to this point where I would move approval of this request.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Moving seconded to approve the new stormwater easement for lot 4, Stillbrook Fifth. And then other comments? I think we're ready to vote.
Rose? Rose?
Yes.
Engel?
Yes.
West?
Yes.
Andreessen?
Yes.
Turler?
Yes.
That resolution passes. Moving to motions for approval. First is,
Sort of quick comment. We meet with Cornell and the Mount Vernon Community School District on Tuesday of next week, correct? And
Tuesday or Monday?
Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Okay. Do you think we should bring this up?
This easement? No, it doesn't necessarily affect either one of them. So if we're being completely honest, the school made the stormwater calculations for their property better, but they didn't necessarily design it to today's standards. So the amount of runoff that comes off of these 3 individual lots onto the school is minuscule compared to the MAC, Cornell Smith Hall, and then soccer fields. Like, so it's better, and
I'll just leave
it shouldn't affect either one of them per se.
That's fine. Thank you.
right, the new superintendent's probably not aware of it. But, moving on to motions for approval. We have an updated claims list this afternoon from Marcia. Any questions or anything to pull off of that? Approval list, claims list?
I move to approve the claims list if there are no questions.
I do have a question.
Let's take a second first and then we can discuss.
Second.
I'll second.
I think I had Craig and then Paul. Second. The questions, yes.
Just a question about the traffic study, because I don't remember the amount. Was that amount within the range that we had already talked about?
It was
I'm
actually less.
assuming. Okay.
Other than this. We did expand the traffic study a little bit further to this house, so we paid a little bit more than what Quick Start would have, but it was our push, not theirs.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
There's currently a motion on the floor to approve the claims list if there are no other questions. This is a voice vote. We're ready to vote on that motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion, consideration of Quick Start shared costs for infrastructure improvements for Highway 1 Rachel Street. Council action as needed.
So I kind of regret this title. So, and the reason for that, I want to kind of preface some of these statements. Quick Start is the catalyst for this conversation, but it's not necessarily the reason for the improvements. So based upon the Highway 1 traffic study, in order to continue to develop south of Plaza and what would be south of Mercy and then that entire area back to the east to Hindu. Rachel Street is going to be the only cross street that will intersect with Highway 1. That's it. From the bypass to the roundabout, Rachel's it. So if we continue to develop in that area, everything will funnel then to Rachel. And based upon the traffic study, Rachel Street will have to be widened on the east side to accommodate potential turn lanes, and then there will be lights that would be introduced at Rachel and Highway 1, and then Rachel would end up being a somewhat long cul-de-sac on the east side. So, you want to blow it up just a little bit, I'll kind of.
Watch out here, Chris. I got you. I love pictures.
Yes.
So,
Visual learner, huh?
so if you can imagine, this is Rachel. Rachel, as extended, would come and curve back and then follow along the creek and then end up in a cul-de-sac to some degree over here. The reason for that is with all of the ground that we built up, there's now like a 12-foot fall, give or take. And then to cross the creek is more like a built-in, would be a built-in place culvert, more like a bridge. So we have one bridge, that's all I want. I would prefer to have some sort of commercial cul-de-sac back here and allow this to develop and then funnel in on Rachel. If you go just to the east a little bit and then zoom just a little bit out. But as you can imagine, so Minish, that is currently under construction with Glen Street, will meet with Business 30 at some point about where my finger's at, and it will come straight south and eventually curve back up and into Rachel. So from a traffic perspective, you're going to have 3 points of conflict with all of this development, mainly commercial and then heavy residential. So Minish, Virgil, and then Rachel. Rachel will be a lighted intersection, and Minish at some point in the future will likely be a lighted intersection. So Quickstar, looking at this property, again, is the reason we're having this discussion, but they're not the only reason that these improvements are being brought forward. So the problem is, when you add lights, a widening of an existing street, and the potential of, I can't remember, it was like 700, 800 feet of new street,
Yes.
Rachel to the west. The cost is obviously more than we could lay back on Quickstar's lab to construct. So what I'm asking tonight is the estimate for the improvements to Rachel to make this happen is about $1.83 million.
To the west, that's just the.
That's to the west, the widening and the lights.
Oh,
But it's a significant amount of money, and Quickstar is willing to expend their own funds as part of this, but it still leaves the city somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million as our contribution to the improvements. Now, there are things that we can look at doing. We can look at potentially creating connection districts by which we would put this in and then charge back as soon as somebody developed the next lot. You know, if they hooked up to the sewer, they would be responsible for X amount of dollars, and same with water. I have Lori working with Dave right at the moment, pursuing a grant application, crossing my fingers. It's called RISE. It's not an immediate need. It doesn't meet the parameters of immediate need, but we're hoping that it would meet the parameters of the local competitive, which would be 50% of the paving and stormwater cost. Bottom line is, I'm asking you if you're comfortable with the 1.3, because worst case scenario, that's what we could potentially be on the hook for if none of these other things, options come into play. So I ran some just basic numbers, and I have to verify this, so please take them with a grain of salt, but quick math. Quickstar would also,
with a K.
yeah. I do have confirmation from Quickstar that they would agree to a $2.5 million minimum assessment. So through the life of whatever debt that we would have to take on in order to make this happen, they would agree to an assessment of $2.5 million. That equates out to about $85,000 a year in taxes with the commercial rate. About $70,000 that is what I would consider TIF eligible, meaning that we can capture that to repay some of this debt with. At 1.3, I wouldn't go longer than 10 years. You know, your minimum payment's going to be 130, 150. So Quickstar alone would make up a little over half of that obligation in the TIF. So that's a benefit. Depending on how quickly some of this other happens to go in, you know, it could not be an issue at all, or it could be that we're taking tip dollars from other locations to help offset the cost of this. So, it doesn't matter, to put it in perspective, it doesn't really matter if this is Quick Start or any other individual development on either side. The improvements to Highway 1 and Rachel are going to have to be made in order for this to continue to develop.
Yeah, and it would fall in our long-range plan as opposed to falling outside of our long-range plan.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, this is not inconsistent with the bypass overlay
No.
plan, correct? Okay.
Correct. So, the bypass plan says highway-oriented commercial, which is what C-stores, convenience stores fall into, can occupy 2 corners of the floor. So, this would set the stage for 1, and then the remainder would probably be on the south side, because I'm almost positive that if Quick Start comes there, most of those stores will require the people selling the ground not to sell the other side, so they have to start on the other side of the highway. The access points that you see at the very tip of the plaza, looks like there's a, kind of a farm access road. Those are, in fact, farm access, and the DOT will not allow the landowners to continue those in the future. They're just for farming purposes.
Is that because it's too close to that?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
So those will go away eventually in the future. And then, like I said, Rachel will be a lighted intersection, Minish would be a lighted intersection. Ideally, obviously, if the Catholic Church ever wanted to bring their parking lot with an access point to Business 30, it would be right across from Minish, and it would all be at that light. So those would be 2 new lighted intersections, and probably, what it would amount to anywhere from 40 to 50 acres of new development ground funneling in those two points. So, some will ask why, and so I did run the reports from the state on total valuation, but in fiscal year 24, our 100% actual property value was $337 million, or just over $337 million. It gave us a bonding capacity of $16.8 million. So the same report generated for this fiscal year takes that 337 up to 418. So that moves our potential debt capacity from 16.8 to just under 21 million.
And where is that 80 million coming from? Is that the assessments?
So a little bit of both.
The new construction?
You've got new assessments, but you have new construction.
Okay. All right.
I'm trying to think of the 2 subdivisions right now in those houses. I'd have to pull the
I mean,
reports
that's
up.
it's almost a 20% increase.
Yeah, the total estimated value of both the subdivisions alone was over 80 million.
Okay.
So this is the importance of having new tax value. Now, I wish the general fund levy would go up like that, but at a very minimum, having the debt service go up by that much allows you to have further conversations about a new pool at some point in the future, and potential additions to the LDC. Like, all sorts of projects become feasible when that debt capacity goes up.
The other thing that I see advantageous to this is, one, it gets the infrastructure started for that additional property to the west. I really like the thought process behind putting that into a business cul-de-sac versus creating another bridge and looping back up to Business 30, because one, it eliminates those cut-throughs in terms of traffic, and I know from a safety perspective, the chief will appreciate that. I think it also segregates that commercial property from the property to the west. And the fact that Minish is being worked on today begins that, opening from Business 30 south into that additional property that's long-term. I know that the owners have looked at that as development development planning in the future, and by adding the improvements to this little spur of Rachel we have today with the turn signal would certainly not hinder development in any way, and to coin a phrase, if you build it, they will come, is kind of what we're hoping based on that.
And to get a handle on 1.33, whether you're building a high school or this, the idea, for me to handle it, I need to get it down to the slowest common denominator. And assuming we get nothing from RISE, assuming it doesn't go any longer than 10 years, assuming that we have no change in the number of citizens in this town, it comes, to my math, to $2.44 a month for each citizen in Mount Vernon for that investment in that whole project, continuation with Rachel. That makes it a little more palatable to citizens.
And it's consistent with our economic development plans, with our bypass and comprehensive plans.
Yeah.
I feel it's the right thing.
And just to confirm, so we're just talking about that spur to the west?
So there'll be,
Or no?
no, the spur on the east would be widened. And I would have to verify with Quickstar, but I believe the $1.83 million estimate is to widen the east, put the lights in, and then extend the road.
Extend east over
Extend
Minish,
Rachel.
or
Well, it would,
extend
so,
west?
it's not going to extend anything on the east.
Okay.
It would widen.
Yeah, okay, so it would widen that stretch.
Yeah, so
Okay.
if you can imagine that a little bit of lack of planning, kind of this is where it gets a little bit detrimental. So Rachel was designed and implemented as a residential street.
Yeah.
So it has to be widened, especially through the parking lot area, probably.
Is that Mercy, right?
Correct.
This is
Yeah.
right there, okay, thank you, yes. So it would probably start to get widened a little bit back to here, and they'll do some curb work, things like that. And then, obviously, you have the lights, which will cost, obviously, more, you're going against 4 lanes of traffic at that point. And then the extension to about here of Rachel. So it kind of curves up and then ends up about here. And then, obviously, when the rest of that property develops, then that cul-de-sac could be placed, and other improvements would be put in.
Now, if Quickstar chooses not to build there, you've made it pretty clear that someday somebody's going to and will have to do this work. But this could become moot as far as in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, so what would happen next is, I would go back to Quickstar and say, the council is in favor of moving this project forward. Quickstar, you've got to do your due diligence and make sure that you're going to develop, because I'm obviously going to pull the trigger on these improvements unless you do. Then there's 2 pathways for it. So the one challenge with RISE is that the city would have to put the infrastructure in themselves. So it would be a city-based project, because we have to own it and do all of that. If there is no RISE or no other grant funding, the city could technically have Quickstar put the improvements in while they're doing the rest of their work, and then just pay them. So there'll be a development agreement. I want that minimum assessment, just so that I've got unknown tax base coming back to offset some of the cost, and then we would look at the rest. So
So are you looking for a motion today?
I
or
am
you
looking
just
for
gonna do
anybody to
that?
look at me and say absolutely not, because if two of you say absolutely not, I'm gonna go back to Quickstar and say it's not unanimous. I don't feel good about it.
Mhm.
If nobody does that, I'm going to say, then I think we should proceed to the next steps.
You,
Okay.
this may be outside your wheelhouse, but what would you ballpark the assessment of an up and running Quickstar-sized convenience store to be?
As far as like what.
Well, here's the real question that I'm asking. If we agree to a 10-year, $2.5 million assessment, and an operating convenience store is at $5 million, and they build in the next 2 years, are we foregoing 8 years of $2.5 million of assessment?
No, I would say,
Or am I overthinking it?
I would say that, number one, the valuations don't go up that fast. To give you a rough idea, just because I pulled the numbers, Lynch, which is the two buildings in between Plaza, and then, you know, that sits with land and buildings at just over $3 million.
Okay.
So,
So theoretically, but
$2.5
not-
million is them agreeing, instead of putting any more cash into it, them agreeing that, hey, we'll pay this in a tax value, so they're looking at it from kind of a long-term commitment as well.
Okay.
The additional thing to factor in, a couple, one is costs of material and whatnot always rises. We know that's, you know, it's very exceptional that it stays steady. And it's extremely rare that it ever goes down. And an open and operation like Quickstar, because interestingly enough, on my way back from Ankeny this weekend from visiting family, currently the only official truck stop between going through Iowa on Highway 30 is the Meskwaki truck stop. And so we're not only talking about the valuation of the land, we're talking about the sales tax that an operation like this will bring into the community. And if we're going to pay a portion of these improvements, I'd rather pay them sooner rather than later.
And I wanna, I think, getting back to your question, because I don't know the answer fully, it's a minimum assessment. So if their value goes up to, the assessor comes back and says, you know, no, your building's worth 3.2, it did go up to 3.2, it just can't fall below that 2.5.
Thank you. Okay. Gotcha.
Chris, I'm curious to know, have they given you a ballpark of how many jobs this might add to the community?
I believe the mayor actually kind of did some looking at what a traditional store would be. It's, the number of jobs was actually kind of higher than I expected, so were the wages. I don't have those numbers in front of me and I don't want to put them out, but.
I've got some of them not right here. High wages, they're $17.50 for assistant managers. So there'll be some impact to uptown businesses probably there. They are an employer of choice in their industry, and that was noted last week, I think, when Iowa did a survey of employers over 500 employees, and Quickstar was the #1 rated company business in the state of Iowa as an employer. So that time was there, was good there. So in the convenience store niche of businesses, Quickstar is at the top of it, and a good partner to have. I'm glad they're interested, and they came to us, you know, several years ago. They came to us.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer because it really does bring in our economic development, and sometimes it's just a catalyst. One thing, this could be a catalyst to bring in more, and it sounds like Quickstar would be a great partner.
Is that what you need?
Motion?
No, I don't need a motion. As long as you guys aren't chasing me out of the room, we're good.
You might note with them that it was a very good discussion and that it was unanimous. There was no split 3-2 or anything like that.
Yeah, I just, I want to say it's like between $6,000 and $8,000 for the bond attorneys to put together a development agreement and go through that entire process. So before we expend that kind of money, I don't want to have Quickstar do a lot of work on their end, trying to close on property, and us go through that expense, and then get here and realize that it's not going to happen, so. And-
One more question, Chris.
Yeah.
Thinking about that bypass plan, have you even started getting into conversation about design guidelines and that kind of stuff? Or is that
So
still?
the bypass plan has design guidelines in it?
Yes, I know it does.
Yeah, I think, as a matter of fact,
I just want to see if they're aware of that.
oh yeah, they're
That's all.
aware.
Okay. Yep.
They're aware, the first thing they ask is there any wiggle room? So they're keenly aware of what they are.
Just have them talk to scooters.
It usually revolves around signage, so, in a perfect world, a C-store right next to the bypass like that, if they could have it their way, would have a 50-foot sign in the air, We've told them, obviously, that the elevation that's unique to Mount Vernon, people will be able to see your store from both directions pretty easy. So, they balk about it, but they're aware of them.
Okay. Good.
Excellent. Send that message back to the Quickstar reps. Moving on to the third item, session consideration of Ferguson Waterworks, next invoice, council action is needed. Process is continuing. Paying bills, anything to add to it?
No, letters will start going out to property owners. There's some notifications that are going on the website as we speak. Getting a few questions on why the city's taking this project on, and number one, the innovation and efficiency at which we can read water meters vaults us in today's century versus where we're currently at. But leak detection, all of the things that the new meters will be allow us to do. And then on a side note, we're also meeting the federal guidelines for lead-based inventories and residential housing too. So it's kind of a multifaceted project, but bottom line is to have this type of technology constantly taking reads, not having to necessarily forego 25% of that revenue when a major leak happens. So it'll be a good thing. I think when it's all said and done, the company is Ferguson Waterworks, so you'll see their vehicles around. They do have some subcontractors, but they've done this in Hiawatha. I believe they've done this in Solon, so they're going to take care of everybody and be looking for those notices.
I would move approval of the first of these two Ferguson Waterworks invoices, number 049167-1, totaling $23,202.95.
I'll second that.
Captain Craig. No further questions. Move to second to move forward with the payment of the first Ferguson Waterworks invoice. And if we're ready to vote on that, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move approval of second invoice for Ferguson Waterworks 04916117-2 in the amount of $6,387.90.
Paul Mark. Move to second to move forward with the second Ferguson Waterworks invoice. If there are no other comments or questions, we're ready to vote on that one. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion consideration of Water's Edge invoice. moving to the pool.
Would this be the final invoice from them?
It looks like it may be penultimate. If I look at, on page 53, it looks like, is that right? 107 out of 150?
So, I don't know that it won't necessarily be the final bill, only because they'll go through the construction process with us as well. This is a significant chunk of creating the building plans, the bidding process, all of that. But I would expect additional invoices, much smaller than this, obviously, but through the construction process.
All right, I will move to approve Water's Edge invoice number 10972 in the amount of $107,520.
Stephanie, is there a second? Got it. Move a second to move forward on this Water's Edge invoice. Other comments, questions? Ready to vote on that? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and consideration of the V&K invoice for the engineering services for the Highway 1 reconstruction project. Council action as needed. That is the one that's started today, right?
No, this is,
Oh, Highway 1, I'm sorry.
yeah, this is in reference to the DOT project where as we'll design it and they'll build it.
Since we've discussed that many times, I would move approval of the V&K invoice 51361-3 totaling $9,685.67.
Thanks, Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is this engineering services for both north and south? Okay. See both, but we're not going to argue the $9,000.
Oh, no, this is just a partial.
Okay.
You know, so engineering fees will range between 10 and 12% of the total project cost, so this will be an
That's
lot
what I
of
see low.
expense.
We're ready to vote on the V&K invoice. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to discussion items, we have Stu Astley here. Discussion on moving forward with the proposal for updating historic preservation guidelines. All that. Thank you, Paul Turner, for volunteering to assist with this project for council representation.
Thank you. I'm Sue Astley. I live in the Ash Park Historic District at 703 Fifth Avenue Northwest. I'm here tonight representing the Mount Vernon Historic Preservation Commission, and we're really excited. And first, it's late in the evening. I promise not to say the word million once. Much smaller amounts. I want to thank you for two things. First of all, you kicked us off with granting us $16,000 toward developing and expanding our design guidelines. So our design guidelines have been in place for 34 years. And they needed to be updated and they needed to be expanded. There were some holes there that we came up against a lot, and so we really needed to do this. I'm going to ask your indulgence a little bit. I want to give a little bit of history first. Oh, the second thing I want to thank you for is for appointing Paul as a liaison to our commission. It's really important that we have as close a working relationship as possible with the city. These are city guidelines that we'll be coming up with. These guidelines will come before the council. And we need to have community input into this process, and we need to certainly involve the city leaders. So this is, Paul's involvement is a really important step for us. I hope I can have your indulgence to do a little bit of history here. We are a historic preservation commission after all. I'm going to go back to 1835, when the Mount Vernon Women's Association, this is not Mount Vernon, Iowa, they bought George and Martha Washington's home, which was at that point not in good repair. They restored it to a better place. And that restoration has continued and extended to the grounds. Industrialization was a real problem for historic buildings, and that meant that the country in 1909 established the Antiquities Act, which protected structures from this industrialization that could have been demolished and destroyed and no longer there. In more modern history, in 1966, the National Historic Preservation Act was passed. And so that had a whole lot of pieces to it. Fortunately, at about the same time, Dick Thomas was hired as a history professor at Cornell College. Dick Thomas has special interest in architecture, And he got to work right away. So Mount Vernon was really on the forefront of this. In the 1970s, he and historic preservationist Barbara Long did a survey of Mount Vernon, which led to the establishment of Mount Vernon's first historic district, the Cornell College District, in 1980. So just a few years after the Historic Preservation Act was passed. Also in 1980, the Historic Preservation Act was amended to involve cities. So it was a national program. They thought it was really important for municipalities to get involved with this. The language is a little awkward. They call it a CLG, but it's really an act that formed historic preservation commissions as part of city government. So our commission is a part of city government. And so cities got involved. The commission at that point was established, so the Historic Preservation Commission was established, and added 2 more historic districts in 1993. The Commercial District and the Ash Park District were formed in that same year. So historic districts are areas that are well preserved for a particular historic period. So our historic periods are, the late 1800s up to about 1920. So that's the kind of vintage of our houses. But districts can change. So people do work on the houses all the time. They have to, especially if they're old, right? And they can change, and their historic value can go way down. I think if you want to see a really tragic example of this, go to Gothenburg. So Gothenburg is a Mississippi River town. People like to have big balconies overlooking the Mississippi River. The historic buildings downtown have had 3rd and 4th stories put on them with these big, modern-looking balconies that overlook the Mississippi. Gothenburg didn't have, they had a Historic Preservation Commission, but they didn't have design guidelines, and they didn't have a design review process. So they just got that about 2 years ago. They finally have some protection for their historic buildings downtown, but it's really kind of a tragic case, and it happened pretty fast. So I was in Gothenburg maybe 8 years ago, and that was not a problem at that point, but now it is. So Mount Vernon also was pretty forward-looking and developing design guidelines and a design review process, thanks to a second person, an important person in Mount Vernon, who was Ed Sauter. So Ed Sauter was really important with regard to the Historic Preservation Commission. He was the second chair. I think of himself as kind of Jefferson. So Dick Thomas is Washington, maybe Ed Sauter is Jefferson. We don't know who Guy Booth is. Guy Booth was also one of the founders.
Who's Hancock?
Yeah, Hancock.
Or Madison, maybe.
Yeah, Madison or Hancock.
He'll be so confused next time we see him.
This is interesting.
Yes. But anyway, so it was really a long process. As you might imagine, people were having their decisions as homeowners put to some scrutiny. And so that's not something that any of us really like to think about, that our decisions might be second-guessed, or we might not be able to do the things that we would like to do. But there was really a long process of developing design guidelines that Mount Vernon could buy into and the community could live with. And Ed Sauter really shepherded that process. I believe that Mount Vernon was the very first small town in Iowa to have a design review process. All of the other towns that I know about in Iowa that have design review guidelines have had them in the last 10 years. So having them in the 2000s, the way Mount Vernon did, was again a really historic and forward-looking thing. And our design guidelines have served us for 34 years. So Ed Sauter, there were no models for it. There were no workshops for it. There were not other communities you could go to and say, what did you do? Ed Sauter did this all completely on his own. He did the drawings. He set up the guidelines. And it's a really an amazing document. There are holes in it. So one person can't think of every possible thing there might be. The guidelines are really good with regard to the commercial historic district. They talk about awnings, they talk about windows. Those are pretty detailed. In the residential districts, they're not so detailed. And there are 2 things that come before the commission a lot that there's not very much said about, and that's windows and porches. So those are a couple of areas. While Ed was on the commission, and while Leah Rogers, she's an archaeologist, was on the commission, both professional historians who worked in this every day. we could make all the decisions because they guided us. They knew the materials, they knew the processes, they knew the construction companies, they knew everything. Once they left the commission for health reasons, it was a lot harder for the rest of us to fill that hole because we couldn't really, there were parts of the guidelines we couldn't look to. We had to make a judgment. Is this historic enough? Are these materials and are these processes historic enough? And that's been really hard for us. We're more lay people than, of course, Lee and Ed were. So we've discussed having new guidelines for about the last 5 years. Thanks to the money that we got from you last winter, we can start to be more concrete about this. We've also gotten a $5,777 grant from the Maurice Foundation. So that also will go toward our design guidelines.
$1 million would have sounded good there.
500 million, 5,000 million.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to say that word. Yeah. So we formed a 5-person subcommittee. That committee wrote a request for proposals. And I worked with Randy Brown, one of our very newest member, to come up with 12 firms that have done design guidelines in Iowa and other towns in the Midwest. We emailed those companies asking if they were interested in being involved and called them. And we got 4 really excellent proposals. First-rate companies, first-rate proposals. Some fit us better than others, so they were not equal as they came before us. Our subcommittee read over the proposal, which outlined what they would do and how they would do it. And each of the firms sent us 5 examples of their previous guidelines. So we read through all of those guidelines for each of those 4 firms. We came up with 1 finalist. So 3 of them were really strong contenders. One had done work more in Chicago in industrial areas on land use. We didn't think they were a good fit for us, but the other 3 were really good fits. And we really could have gone with any of the 3 of them. But this one was just a little bit above the other firms. The firm is Jason, Mermian, and Thompson, and they are in Columbus, Ohio. And if we go with them, if we sign a contract with them, they will have a 3-person crew to work on this. Each of them has an advanced degree in historic preservation, all 3 of them do. And the architect in charge, the project manager, would be a woman named Sarah McLaughlin. Some of the things that we liked about them was, first of all, they had a lot of experience. They were the firm probably with the most experience doing design guidelines, including in Cedar Rapids. So we love the Cedar Rapids design guidelines, and they did those guidelines. And it's a plus for us because the architectural styles are similar there as here. The firm is going to do study of architectural guidelines and a study of Mount Vernon no matter what. But we know that they can deal well with the architectural styles that we have here in Mount Vernon. They emphasize in their guidelines using plain English. And trust me, when you read a lot of these, you really appreciate that. Because sometimes they don't communicate in the language that I use, maybe a little bit like engineering reports, right? We don't want to have our design guidelines be written for an engineer or an architectural historian. Their plans seem reasonable and realistic. So they detailed in their proposal all the steps they would go through to come up with a plan for us. And it seemed like they had thought through all of those possibilities. And they are open to consultation and feedback. That's really important, especially when you're dealing with a small town like Mount Vernon where there are a lot of stakeholders. And so they are going to need to really be able to talk to people. The reference calls that I did indicated that they are especially strong in this. In one city, Duluth, Duluth had some design guidelines. There were delays on the city end, and the firm, because of a grant deadline, was left with 2 months to create something. And they did. They went through this process. They did everything that they wanted them to do. Of course, there was no time for frills or niceties, but they were able to complete the project in 2 months, in spite of the fact that it probably should have taken a few months. And in Cedar Rapids, there was a different complication in that there are a lot of different people in there, stakeholders. Some are professional architects, some are lay people. And the person I talked to said that they were really good at getting information out of people and translating it into English so that everybody could kind of understand what was on the table, and they were really good at negotiating through that process. By coincidence, we didn't plan this. We reviewed all of these without reference to cost. We wanted to just see, which was the best proposal. There is a state grant program that can be gone to if we needed significantly more money. That grant program is open right now. We could ask for those additional funds. But the firm we liked the most was the one that had the lowest cost. So their bid was for $24,927. And it's a realistic bid, we are sure, given their lengthy experience and the detail in which they outlined what they would do, we're confident that they can get the job done within that cost constraint. The highest bid was $49,000, so it was substantially more. The other two bids were in the mid to high 30s, so there's a range there. The $24,927 seemed kind of reasonable in that context. So that's the firm that we like the most. The commission has seen this proposal and they like it as well. We have the $16,000 that you, should I put $1 million in there? Sorry. We also, as I said, we have $5,722 from the Morris Family Fund. However, there's an ask here. We are short $2,850 toward this $24,927 amount. As I said, there's a grant program open right now from the state that we could go to for that money. That would delay it. We don't yet have a timeline from them for this, so we're going to have to set up a timeline once everything is finalized. But it would be wonderful if we could have $2,850 from the city of Mount Vernon. So that's a request that we have. Thank you for your time and attention. Do you have any questions for me?
I do. Fabulous, by the way. I like the history lesson in there. So having worked in a consulting firm for a long time, our contracts usually had the asterisk saying does not include reasonable expenses. Would there be, in addition to the remaining money for the $25,000 of this contract, would you think, Sue, that there will be expenses for travel, subsistence, things like that, materials?
Those were included in their proposal.
There you go.
They included all of this in their proposal. So I just talked to them last Friday, so I haven't really seen that contract yet, but I don't believe there will. Now, there will be a cost to us as a commission. So we're going to have to advertise all of these events in the city. We'll undoubtedly send letters to people who live in the historic districts and inviting them to things. So there'll be some expense for us for those kinds of things. But they have their travel and their expenses are included.
Good, good. And the second question would be, so you just said they're not going to give you a timeline of beginning and end until you've agreed to the contract, at least in principle.
Right.
Is there a chance that it could bleed into the next fiscal year, so that if we wanted to come up with the rest of this money for you, plus some of the expenses for the Preservation Commission, we can do it next fiscal year? Or maybe they will say, we will stretch out this $25,000 to be $12,500 in this fiscal year, $12,500 the next fiscal year, things like that.
Those are all possibilities.
Right.
So the first step of this is for them to come to Mount Vernon and do a historical survey, an architectural survey, and some negotiation a little bit. We've given them a list of things we want already, and thus there are kind of holes we've seen in our current design guidelines. But the timeline will be finalized when they come to Mount Vernon and they know kind of what the scope of the work, the final scope of the work will be. So yeah, it could go over into next fiscal year. I do think that we have enough in our current budget. The city is really generous with us, I'll say. Don't cut us down, please.
Not in the middle of a big project.
But I think we have enough in our current budget to do all the correspondence that we need to do and all the advertising that we need to do. We've reserved some money in that budget.
Good.
And we would contribute toward this, the grant sum of $300. That's the amount that we can still contribute.
This is listed as a discussion item, but I think there's implication of some action here too. But what was the will of the council to address this item at this point?
I feel that we should support it. I
You're here.
appreciate your passion, and I know that it's been difficult for you because of the holes that are involved in the current plan. And it's also been time-consuming on the part of our city staff, for all of that negotiation and discussion. So I think that this would be money well spent.
Yeah, from my perspective, the involvement here. Just to add on to what Sue said about the firm that put in the number one proposal, I think it's important to note that the team members are all historic preservationists as specialties. They're not, a specialty in other areas, so their focus is there. The other thing that jumped out at me as, a member of a community of 4,500 versus Cedar Rapids or Duluth, Minnesota, some of those others, was they also have experience in working with smaller communities. Of the ones they listed, there were at least 3 that were under 10,000, which told me that they're a good fit from that. And the third thing that Sue mentioned is their community outreach. We've seen the value of that through the pool discussions, as well as what's going on with the uptown streetscape. And I think that's a real strength that they want to get people involved. Because the real end user of these guidelines isn't necessarily the commission, it's not the council, it's the homeowners that are going to need that. And to have those in English and have those holes filled in will make a difference for the homeowners especially, and it will also make the whole process clearer and cleaner, because we all know things have changed in the last 34 years in every aspect of life. And so I applaud the commission for the work they've done. The due diligence of this group in their methodology of reviewing and selecting is one of the best processes I've seen by a volunteer commission or board in all of my years working with the city. So I really want to credit Sue and the team for that.
Thank you. And one of our contributors is 14.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes. Dawson.
Dawson.
Yeah. She was very active in this process.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you for your perspective, Paul. And what is the little group here? Very support? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would
Yeah.
move for the approval.
Well,
Well, I'm not moving anything.
So I believe Chris is going to say that we could say that we support this in principle, but we would have to have an agenda item to actually make a motion to approve the specific amount in a future meeting.
Correct.
And I was just curious too, so that 2,800, which, yeah, that sounds great. But you also said that that could be attained also through grant, but it would set things back.
It would, right.
How far back?
Probably 3 months.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so the grant deadline is later this month.
Okay.
I might have a week to write a grant if we need to go for grant funds. But then they would have at least a couple of months delay time while they review the grant and decide whether to allocate the funds or not.
Okay.
I don't think that should slow anything down, though. You can agree in principle, sign a contract and not have 100% of the money in hand. And go through, as Mark is, I think, alluding to, apply for the grant,
Sure.
slow roll it if you need to, because this is going to take a while, in 3, 4, 5 months. And then we could, if you don't get the grant, we can come back and.
Sure.
Yeah, I would prefer that, but yeah, saying that.
Either way.
I support it.
So let me say, writing a grant proposal is a very time-consuming process.
That's right.
I prefer not to do that action if I don't have to, especially for a relatively small amount of money.
Yeah.
But I certainly can.
I'm looking at
That's
something
what
that's
you
written
desire
for
for me
a
to do.
Yeah.
But it'll kill me to do this, to do a grant proposal in a week.
Let's not,
Okay.
let's not
Do
do
you have a
that. No.
recommendation?
We have Joe Jefferson on staff right now, so he could help write the grant application. It would be beneficial. So there are a lot of things that factor in this. How long do they take to actually prepare a document? If it's into 2 fiscal years, it's not as big of an issue. We can still amend the budget at some point, but obviously if we could use Joe and you know, potentially put a grant application in there just to see if we can get those funds, that would be ideal. But
So at our next meeting, would we be able to do an approval of the funding in the event that the grant money doesn't come through?
so at the next meeting, you're just gonna approve their contract.
Okay.
So if that's the company that you select, you're gonna approve their contract with that dollar amount in it, and however you come up with it is,
Okay.
it doesn't matter to them, because you've adopted their contract.
Okay. So that, I think.
Yeah, I would say,
Support moving forward.
at the next September meeting, we would approve the contract with that firm. That would lock them into being able to get started, and then in the meantime, see if you could just get with Joe. He works Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay.
He's willing to work Thursday if need be, so he would be a resource that we can hand to you, and just see if we can get it.
Thank you.
Sounds like we have enough direction on that, for that process. And M is reports, and the mayor's report, I'll mention probably 3 things. First of all, hopefully everybody's seen recognition, or heard about the recognition in Midwest Living. They didn't have it at the library here yet, but looking forward to catching that article, and also the New York Times with regard to the Lincoln Wine Bar. That was pretty neat recognition, and there's also reference to the Gazette article about the New York Times article.
What is that?
I read that.
Tuesday, August 22nd.
Takes place owned by True Value.
Talked about a bunch of new places in pizza in Cedar Rapids area, and included ours. That was recognition number 1. I'm speaking to Leon Topek's class tomorrow. It's a conversation. It's in computer science, but it's about great expectations and about civic planning. How do you plan for generations out, whether it's development here for a quick start or residential development and so on. So looking forward to that. The third thing I'll mention is an interview that I did today with Terry from Kansas, University of Kansas, right?
Kansas, yes.
Doing an interview for a book with regard to the relationship in small towns with a newspaper that is not necessarily locally owned, but assisted by an entity like the University of Iowa Journalism Department. So that was a very interesting perspective there. He was writing a book about news desert universities. So that was pretty famous. So those are 3 things I'd mention there. Any commission or council?
So Child Care Group is going to meet on Friday, and I'm not going to be there due to a previous appointment. I don't know, Tom, if you plan on being there. Thank you very much. I've been a bit AWOL there, and I apologize. But
And they've kind of been off for the summer, so you haven't missed a whole lot there, but I will be there.
thank you. And then, of course, next week we'll meet with the 3 largest employers.
Anything else from your report, Chris? You referenced, you sent out a lot of things, last Friday's newsletter.
The only thing I wouldn't mention real quick, the business 30 portion of the construction, Ella Pelling reached out to Eldon today that said they expect chips Thursday into Friday, so that means they'll do the grinding on our side, probably closer to the end of the week, but a lot of truck traffic, so just be mindful.
As far as the Casey's of Lisbon, when I checked them out this morning, so slowly working this direction.
Everybody in my neighborhood got the notice. I was just about ready to send something out in the neighborhood social media, and the letter came out, and I didn't have to do it. So
Did it get mailed or hand delivered?
Hand,
It was supposed to be hand delivered.
yeah,
Okay.
it was rubber band to the doorknob.
Anything else that needs to come before this council at this time? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Did you really?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks for all your work on that, Sue.